Don't assume it was left by accident. If you see something, say something.
President Dick Cheney takes a question from David Rockefeller.
Vice President, I just enjoyed so much your whole speech, but I was particularly pleased that you gave such a strong endorsement for the free trade agreement for all the Americans, subject that has been of great concern to me for many years, and particularly recently, and I think it's absolutely essential for the strength of our economy.
Afternoon, everyone. This is We Are Change with Howard Nema. And you're listening to informradio.com. If you'd like to call in, or you can like us on Skype, or call us in at 772-905-3018. Any topic, any subject. This is where the news, the controlled mainstream media ignores, the top story, and your voice is heard. I represent We Are Change organization, the Connecticut chapter, wearechangeCT.org. You can also, of course, check out wearechange.org. And you can watch rebroadcasts of this film, this transmission, which is being videotaped at YouTube freedomfirstfilms.com. Anyhow, a lot of interesting news in the last 24 hours, eh? The tyrant Gadhaffi, murdered by a angry, crazy mob. A lot to be said about that. Clinton's journey. Also, this is an article by Kurt Nemo. Clinton's journey. Gadhaffi reported killed in Sirte. This is the earlier reports of it. But what's very interesting, of course, he was found in a hole, like Saddam Hussein was found in a hole. It's just, interesting, the whole mob mentality. Now, the article here pretty much is based on Reuters information. So it's just really, I'm just going to plug Kurt because I think he's a great writer, and he's at Infowars.com. And he does a tremendous job exposing the criminals that have hijacked our world, basically. Now, Reuters reported that the outed Libyan leader had died of his wounds, citing a senior military official. He was also hit in his head. There was a lot of firing against his group, and he died. Officials say Gadhaffi was trying to flee in a convoy which NATO warplanes attacked. We'll talk a little bit about NATO in a moment. Others say Gadhaffi was found in a hole and begged not to be killed. And that's what I heard. Iraq's toppled leader Saddam Hussein was also found in a hole, like as I mentioned, by invading U.S. soldiers. Now, prior to the announcement and unconfirmed death of Gadhaffi, Secretary of State Clinton ventured Libya and called for his murder. We hope he can be captured or killed as soon, so you don't have to fear him any longer. Now, this is an interesting psyop going on here, everybody. I'm going to go into the history of the country of Libya, the modern history post-World War II. And now, there is no doubt that Gadhaffi was a little like, he was a space cadet out there as far as he had some crazy ideas. But you know something? They demonized him and made him out to be far worse than he actually was. In fact, these criminals who have hijacked our government and highest levels of society and influence in the corporate world, media, and other sources, are far more guilty of murder and genocide. And, we're talking about mass murder. We're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of people. So anything that Gadhaffi does, even if he did shoot down the Libya plane, which everyone who was paid $4 million apiece, by the way, the witnesses for the United States to give testimony in the Lockerbie, Scotland trial. Everyone doesn't remember that. And then most of them, if not all of them, recanted what they said afterwards. This is all true. Now, also, in 1951, Libya was a impoverished nation, one of the poorest nations in the world. And by 1958, there was oil discovered. Now, of course, the globalists went wild. They were already planning they already had the European Union through the original Bilderberg meetings in Bretton Woods and all of that they conspired to control the money supply and control commerce, and of course then collectivize everything. Now Libya was impoverished for 11 years until Gadhaffi took power in a coup. And again, they always demonize these things. You know, the founding fathers went against England. Now, technically, right, from the English perspective, they were, you know, the founding fathers were terrorists. You know, we're traitors to England, traitors to the Queen. So be careful the way they label people, because remember what's going on. Remember what this country was founded on. America was founded on the principles of liberty above all, and freedom. And think about how our liberty and freedom has been slowly disintegrated and is disintegrating as we speak. But let's keep it on Libya. So in 1958, the Libyans found the oil, and again, interests and such were that they were hoarding the money, sort of like the banks hoard the money, sort of like they get bailed out trillions or will destroy the economy and give you nothing and hold back on loans and fight all these other you know, allegations of fraud with the market, with the manipulating the markets, and of course they were doing mortgage fraud, and I have articles on that. I got quite a stack here to go through, actually. But stating on Libya, because this is again really this is a very important time in history, not just for the Libyan people, but for the world, because this is where we can wake up and literally see the evil as it unfolds. Because I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. Now, the first thing that happened when you look at the difference between Gadhaffi and the hoarders, the elite that give back nothing and take everything and keep wanting more. He gave more to his people than any other country. Most importantly, and this is why they wanted him dead, was he abolished their central banking concept. So the central bank in Libya has no debt. The Libyan people are also under amazing, they have amazing rights, and you wouldn't believe it. So this information we're getting that he was such a tyrant really isn't so true. Through my research, I've collected some information that's really actually quite prevalent to this. I think it's over here. Yeah. And I jotted down a small article that I wrote, and it goes like this. In 1951, Libya was the poorest country, one of the poorest countries in the world. Of course, I mentioned that. Before the NATO invasion, Libyans enjoyed the highest standard of living in Africa. In Libya, homes are considered a human right. So basically, you have a home. Now, I know it's going to sound a little communist, what I'm saying here, but the difference is that it is not a totalitarian, it is more socialist. I still have to applaud the vitality of what's here and what they actually... I mean, this is against everyone's thinking, people. Listen, believe me, I first would look at this and say Libya, and then you look at what I'm about to say about these things, and it just sounds outrageous. But technically, this could happen here if the criminals weren't stealing everything and taking all the money and taking all the resources. Actually wouldn't need half of these things, because you say, well, if they had that here, it would bankrupt the country. Well, why didn't it bankrupt Libya, and why are they so successful? After I tell you what they can give you, and you still have property rights, but they're actually guaranteeing you property. So if you can't afford it, they'll find a way to give it to you. That does sound like communism or socialism, but you own the property. So it's very different. I mean, literally, it is a sharing of the wealth to the truest extent. Just my perspective on this. Now again, he was accused of a lot of things. He did a lot of things. We know that he did. But our government, we shouldn't be. It's like Jesus said. He who without sin cast the first stone. And that's exactly what's going on here. Because who the hell are we to judge anybody in this war, any maniacal person, including Hitler? Because what we do stealthily is no different than what Stalin and Mao and Hitler and Pol Pot and all of these lunatic psychopaths. Okay, we have lunatics and psychopaths, maniacal people. John Lennon said it. There are maniacal people with maniacal intentions and I'll probably be looked at as the crazy person. That's what he was said, and he had said that in the 70s. Now, isn't that not true? Isn't that exactly what happens to anybody that's aware and awake of this? They just demonize you, call you crazy, call you a conspiracy theorist. Meanwhile, they'll shit in your face and say, eat it. And you will. I don't. Not since I woke up. No way. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, back to Libya. So before NATO invaded, as I mentioned, the Libyans enjoyed the highest standard of living in Africa. In Libya, homes are considered a human right. So you're going to have a home, whether you can own it or not. That's you will own it eventually, with no interest, by the way. Loans with interest are illegal in Libya. And if you think anything that I'm saying isn't true, spend some time and research it, and look to the real truth. Because remember, this is where the news, the controlled mainstream media ignores the top story, and your voice is heard. So call us in, 772-905-3018. I'd like to hear what your opinions are on Libya. I'd like to hear what you have to say about this subject, and how you feel about the people of Libya, and how if you disagree or agree, or if you think that I'm a traitor to our country because I'm saying all these things, anything. Because remember, this government is not our country, okay? Our Constitution creates a representative form of government, okay? But it's the Constitution and the people are this country, not the government. And remember that, because a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, this whole Agenda 21 protocol I'll go into later in the show is just going to expose so much of that. Anyhow, so call us in, 772-905-3018. That's 772-905-3018. Love to hear from you. Again, this is informedradio.com, and you can hit us up on Skype and join in. So, if you get married in Libya, you receive $50,000 from the government to buy a home. Electricity is also free in Libya for all people. Now, before Gadhaffi, less than 1/5 of Libyans were literate. Today, education is free and of high quality, and the literacy rate is 83%. Healthcare is also free and of high quality. Now, if Libyans can't find the education and healthcare that they want or need in Libya, the government funds them to go abroad and access it. Did you hear that? Now think about that. Communist sounding? Possibly. Socialist sounding? Certainly. But you take the illegal aspect. Gadhaffi was on record as saying that governments and parliaments are corrupt, and they're corruptible, and the people, the real people, the people should have control over everything. He even said that he would put his own father out in the street before he would put another Libyan person. Now, they all propagandize this and say, oh, that's not true, that's not true. Well, that's like saying Hitler didn't kill 6 million Jews and 10 million, total of 10 million people, that Stalin didn't slaughter 40 million people, that Mao didn't slaughter 80 million people. Think about it. Anyway, this is called manipulative mind control, and the general population has been under it and under its spell, because now we're in generations. I mean, I'm in my early 40s, and all I know is the television and stuff that I grew up on. The generation before me, they grew into it because they were, growing up in the 50s, becoming 7 or 8 years old in the 50s, right? So they started watching television in the earlier part. But again, through Operation Mockingbird and Project Monarch, or Operation Monarch, if you research these things from the CIA, you will learn that the CIA literally funds television shows and commercials, and all this stuff is a fraud, ladies and gentlemen. This World Wildlife Fund, it's all this eugenics. They're all stealing the money and actually doing terrible things